an abandoned Labrador Retriever, starving and injured, desperately seeking shelter in the midst of a devastating storm. What happens when this broken dog finds his way into the home of a man who lost everything? No one could have predicted what would unfold next. This isn't just another rescue story. It's a journey that'll show you how two shattered souls can heal each other in ways no one thought possible. Get ready for a story that'll bring tears to your eyes and remind you that sometimes the most profound connections come when we least expect them and need them most. The Colorado winter howled outside Michael Foster's remote mountain cabin. Temperatures plummeted as the worst blizzard in decades buried the landscape under 3 feet of snow. A 38-year-old former search and rescue paramedic, Michael had retreated to this isolated property 6 months ago after a devastating mountain rescue gone wrong left him with a career-ending leg injury and unrelenting survivor's guilt. Tonight, as the wind screamed through the pines, Michael sat before his fireplace, massaging his aching leg while nursing a cup of coffee, and the memories that haunted him. His days of saving lives were behind him, replaced by endless hours of solitude and regret. At precisely 1:42 a.m., a sound at his back door broke through his dark thoughts. A soft, persistent scratching, barely audible above the storm. Michael froze, listening. Living 20 miles from his nearest neighbor, visitors were non-existent, especially during a blizzard. The scratching came again, followed by a faint, mournful whimper. Curiosity overcame caution. Grabbing his crutch, Michael limped to the door and cracked it open. There, collapsed in a snowdrift on his porch, lay a Labrador Retriever. The dog's once sturdy golden frame was now skeletal, its coat matted with ice and dirt. A frayed rope, still knotted around the dog's neck, told of cruel abandonment. "My God," Michael whispered, his paramedic instincts kicking in. The Labrador was hypothermic, starving, and near death. Its eyes, soft brown pools of fading hope, briefly met Michael's, conveying a desperate plea for help. Without hesitation, Michael scooped the frozen animal into his arms, wincing as his bad leg protested. The dog weighed shockingly little for its size and offered no resistance. It had no strength left to fight or flee. Inside, Michael wrapped the Labrador in blankets and placed him by the fire. The dog's breathing was shallow, his heartbeat weak and irregular. For the first time in months, Michael felt the old urgency that once defined him, the race against death, the desperate bid to save a life hanging by a thread. "Stay with me," he urged, gently rubbing circulation back into the dog's limbs. "I've got you now. Stay with me." As snowdrifts mounted outside and the wind keened like mourners, Michael fought through the night for the life of a dog he'd never met, unaware that this unexpected visitor would become the key to his own salvation. Dawn broke with merciful clarity, the storm finally spent. Michael hadn't slept, keeping vigil beside the Labrador Retriever, who'd survived the night against all odds. The dog's condition remained dire, severely dehydrated, malnourished, with frostbitten paws and an infected wound on his flank. "You need a vet," Michael murmured, checking the dog's weak pulse. "But we're snowed in for at least 2 days." He'd removed the cruel rope from the dog's neck, revealing raw skin beneath. The Labrador had no collar, no tags, nothing to indicate where he'd come from or who'd abandoned him in such brutal conditions. As Michael gently cleaned the neck wounds, the dog's eyes flickered open, regarding him with weary trust. "Easy," Michael soothed. "I'm trying to help." To his surprise, the Labrador made no attempt to pull away, despite obvious pain. Instead, the dog shifted slightly, resting his head against Michael's knee in a gesture of exhausted gratitude. That simple contact, the first touch Michael had shared with another living being in months, broke through a wall within him. Tears he'd refused to shed after his accident spilled freely now. "I guess we're both pretty broken," he told the dog, who watched him with steady brown eyes. "But we're still here." Throughout the day, Michael coaxed small amounts of diluted broth into the Labrador, applied antiseptic to his wounds, and fashioned makeshift booties for the frostbitten. Pause. The dog tolerated each intervention, his gentle nature shining through even in weakness. By evening, Michael had created a comfortable bed near the fire, but the Labrador seemed distressed whenever Michael moved away. After several attempts to leave the dog to rest, Michael finally settled on the floor beside him, his bad legs stretched awkwardly. "Just until you fall asleep," he promised. As darkness reclaimed the mountains, Michael found himself telling the Labrador about the avalanche that had claimed 2 lives and left him permanently injured, about the nightmares, the surgeries, the medals he'd thrown in a drawer because they felt like mockeries of his failure. "I couldn't save them," he confessed to the silent dog. "I was supposed to be the best, and I couldn't save them." The Labrador shifted closer, pressing his thin body against Michael's side, offering warmth to the man who'd saved him. In that simple gesture lay a profound message that pierced Michael's grief. Sometimes being saved was as important as saving others. For the first time in 6 months, Michael slept without nightmares. 3 days passed before the mountain roads were cleared enough for travel. During that time, the bond between Michael and the Labrador, whom he'd started calling Scout, deepened in ways that surprised him. Despite Scout's weakness, the dog followed Michael throughout the cabin, his soulful eyes maintaining a watchful presence that seemed more concerned with Michael's well-being than his own. "You're supposed to be the patient here," Michael said on the morning of the 4th day, as Scout limped anxiously beside him when pain forced Michael to sit and massage his damaged leg. As Scout's strength gradually returned, his personality emerged, gentle, loyal, with an uncanny ability to sense Michael's needs. When Michael struggled on his crutch, Scout appeared at his side, offering his sturdy frame as support. When nightmares jolted Michael awake, Scout was there, a steady presence in the darkness. Finally able to reach town, Michael loaded Scout into his truck for the journey to Elk Creek Veterinary Clinic. The Labrador's anxiety at leaving the cabin was obvious, his eyes constantly seeking Michael for reassurance. "We'll come back," Michael promised, realizing he'd already decided Scout would stay, at least until they found his original home, if that was even a place worth returning to. Dr. Maya Wilson, a veterinarian in her early 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, examined Scout thoroughly while Michael explained the circumstances of their meeting. "He's severely malnourished and has an infected puncture wound," she confirmed, gently palpating Scout's flank. "Based on the rope burns and the condition of his pads, I'd say he was tied up outdoors, broke free, and traveled a long way before finding you, during a blizzard." Michael added, his voice tight with anger at whoever had abandoned the Labrador. "Yeah, in the middle of that storm." Dr. Wilson nodded grimly. "He's lucky to be alive. Most animals in his condition wouldn't have survived that weather." She glanced up at Michael. "Actually, you both got lucky that night." "What do you mean?" "Labrador Retrievers are incredibly attuned to people," she said, smiling at Scout, who remained calm under her examination, despite obvious pain. "When they choose someone to trust, it's never random. This one chose well." As they left with antibiotics, special food, and treatment instructions, Michael found himself thinking about Dr. Wilson's words. Had Scout somehow known to seek out someone who needed saving as much as he did? That evening, while Scout ate, his first full meal with cautious enthusiasm, his tail giving a faint wag, Michael made calls to local shelters and police, reporting the found dog. No one had reported a missing Labrador Retriever. One shelter worker suggested bluntly, "He was probably abandoned on purpose. People dump their problems in these mountains all the time." Later, as snow began falling again outside, Michael sat on his porch steps, watching the silent forest. Scout emerged from the cabin and settled beside him, their shoulders touching. The Labrador's presence somehow made the vast wilderness feel less empty, the silence less absolute. "You know," Michael said quietly, "before you showed up, I was just waiting out my days here. Not really living, just existing." Scout turned, resting his head on Michael's knee. Those soulful brown eyes seemed to say, "I get it. I was just surviving too." Something was changing between them, a healing neither could have managed alone. 2 weeks passed, marked by quiet routines and gradual recovery. Scout's physical transformation was remarkable. His golden coat regained its luster, his frame filled out, and his energy returned in playful bursts that revealed his young age, maybe 3 or 4 years. The infected wound on his flank had closed, leaving a scar shaped oddly like a crescent moon. Michael found himself changing too. The demands of caring. For Scout brought structure to days that had once blurred together. Morning walks, despite winter's grip, became a highlight rather than a chore. His own physical therapy exercises, long abandoned, resumed with Scout as his attentive audience. "The leg'll never be the same," Michael explained to Scout during one session, showing the limited range of motion. "Career-ending, they called it." Scout watched with his head tilted, then placed his paw gently on Michael's scarred leg, as if saying, "Show me where it hurts." Michael laughed, the sound startling in its unfamiliarity. "You're something else, you know." That. Though Michael had posted notices about the found dog, he secretly hoped no one would claim Scout. The Labrador had become essential to his existence, a living reason to keep going when grief had nearly consumed him. During one of their follow-up visits to Dr. Wilson, she suggested something that caught Michael off guard. "You know, with your background in mountain rescue and Scout sensitivity, you might consider training him as a therapy dog, or even for search and rescue support." Michael's instinctive rejection must have shown on his face because, she added gently, "Not all paths forward look like the ones behind us. Sometimes they're better." That night, Michael couldn't sleep, her words echoing in his mind. On impulse, he pulled out an old search and rescue training manual, forgotten since his accident. Scout settled beside him, sniffing the familiar equipment illustrations with evident interest. "You'd probably be good at this," Michael mused, scratching Scout's ears. "Better than sitting up here with a has-been rescuer." Scout responded by placing his paw firmly on the manual, then looking at Michael with an expression that seemed to say, "We could do this together." The idea took root, tentatively at first, then with growing conviction. Not a return to his old life, but something new, something that honored what he'd lost, while embracing what he'd found. Later that week, Michael got a call from the local shelter. A family had seen his found dog poster and claimed to recognize Scout as their lost pet. They'd arrived the next day to check. The news should have been welcome. Proof Scout wasn't abandoned, just lost. But it hit Michael like a punch. He spent the evening watching Scout sleep peacefully by the fire, trying to imagine the cabin without him. The thought was unbearable. Morning arrived with heavy snow and heavier hearts. As Michael and Scout waited on the porch for the arriving family, the Labrador pressed close to his side, sensing his distress. "If they're your family and they treated you well, you should go home," Michael told him, though every word hurt. That's the right thing. Scout's response was to lean harder against Michael's leg, the damaged one he'd been strengthening by supporting Scout's weight on their walks. The message seemed clear. "I am home." A red SUV pulled into Michael's driveway, and a family of 4 emerged, parents in their 30s with 2 young kids. At the sight of them, Scout stayed still beside Michael, showing no recognition or excitement. When the family approached, the Labrador pressed closer to Michael's leg, his body language uneasy. "That's not our Max," the woman said right away, disappointment in her voice. "Our dog had a white patch on his chest. This one isn't him." Relief flooded Michael, followed by guilt for feeling relieved. He expressed sympathy for their continued search while Scout held his guard-like position beside him. "You two seem pretty bonded," the father observed as they prepared to leave. "Maybe it worked out the way it was supposed to." Those words lingered after the family drove off. Maybe their meeting in the blizzard hadn't been chance, but something more. Two broken beings finding exactly what they needed in each other. With the question of Scout's ownership settled, Michael committed fully to their future together. He registered Scout officially, scheduled proper vaccinations, and researched therapy dog training programs that could accommodate his own physical limits. Spring arrived in the mountains, melting snow and revealing a landscape of renewal. On a bright April morning, Michael loaded camping gear into his truck, Scout supervising with evident excitement. This would be their first overnight trek, a test of Michael's leg and their training progress. "Nothing too ambitious," he assured. "Scout, just a night under the stars to see how we do." They hiked 2 miles to a small lake. Michael's pace steady if not fast, his reliance on a walking stick less than in winter. Scout moved with a Labrador's natural bounce, circling back often to check on Michael, always attentive to his needs. At the lakeside campsite, as Michael prepared their simple dinner, he reflected on the past 4 months. The paralyzing grief that had driven him to isolation had faded, replaced by purpose. His legs still ached, and probably always would, but it no longer defined him. The nightmares came less often, and when they did, Scout's presence anchored him to safety. "You know what's shocking?" Michael said to Scout as they watched the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. "Everyone thought I saved you that night, but it was the other way around, wasn't it?" Scout's soulful eyes met his, a silent understanding passing between them. The abandoned had become the rescuer, the broken had become the healer. Later, as stars emerged above their tent, Michael's phone unexpectedly chimed with a rare signal in these remote mountains. A text from Dr. Wilson read, "Perfect timing. County Search and Rescue is looking for Canine Therapy Team volunteers for survivor support. Training starts next month. Thought of you two immediately. Interested?" Michael looked at Scout, curled, against him in the tent, and felt a certainty he hadn't known since before the avalanche. "What do you think, partner? Ready for a new mission?" Scout's tail thumped decisively against the tent floor. All the answer Michael needed. Summer painted the Colorado mountains in wildflower brilliance as Michael and Scout completed their final session in the therapy dog training program. The change in both, since that desperate winter night, was striking. Scout, now the picture of canine health and confidence, gleamed with a golden coat. Michael stood straighter, his pronounced limp eased by months of purposeful rehab. "You two are naturals," remarked Olivia Chen, their training coordinator, as Scout performed flawlessly in a simulation with a distressed victim. "Especially considering where you both started." The therapy work revealed Scout's extraordinary sensitivity to human emotion. The Labrador could spot signs of distress before they were obvious, offering comfort with uncanny precision. This gift, paired with Michael's medical background and personal trauma experience, made them uniquely effective in crises. Their first official assignment came sooner than expected, a family of hikers lost overnight on nearby Thunder Mountain. Though not part of the search operation, Michael and Scout were requested to provide support at the base camp for anxious family members. As Michael parked at the Trailhead Command Center, memories of his last mountain rescue surfaced unexpectedly. His hands tightened on the steering wheel, breath quickening. Scout immediately placed a paw on his arm, the signal they'd developed for Michael's anxiety spikes. "I'm okay," Michael assured him, taking deliberate breaths. "Just remembering." Scout's steady gaze said what words couldn't. "The past doesn't define today. We're here now." Throughout that long day, as searchers combed the mountain, Michael and Scout worked with the waiting family, parents frantic about their 2 teenage kids who'd wandered off trail. Scout moved instinctively between them, offering his calming, presence where it was most needed, while Michael provided info and emotional support. Near sunset, when radios crackled with news of the teens being found safe but cold and scared, Scout's behavior shifted. He moved purposefully toward the trail entrance, eyes fixed ahead, body alert but calm. "What is it, buddy?" Michael asked, following his gaze. Minutes later, the search team appeared with the recovered teens. Scout had somehow sensed their approach before anyone else could see or hear them. Even more remarkable was what happened next. Scout gently approached the most shaken teen, a girl of about 16, physically unharmed but emotionally overwhelmed, and settled quietly against her side. The effect was instant and profound. As she knelt to hug him, she found comfort in his steady presence. "How did he know?" the girl's mom asked Michael later, watching her daughter finally sleep with Scout nearby. "He understands what it means to be lost and found," Michael replied simply. That night, driving home under star-filled skies, Michael realized something that brought both peace and purpose. He might never fully recover from the physical and emotional scars of his failed rescue, but those wounds had shaped the person capable of connecting with Scout and doing this work. His brokenness wasn't a failure, it was part of his journey. Back home, as Scout settled into his bed, now upgraded from the fireside floor to a proper orthopedic dog bed, Michael got an unexpected email from Dr. Wilson. It included a news article about a puppy mill raid in Wyoming, where several Labrador Retrievers had been rescued from horrific conditions. "Thought you might want to know," her message read. One confiscated record shows a male lab matching Scout's description, and age was sold, then returned for being too soft for guard work. The mill owner said this dog escaped during transport about 5 months ago. Could explain a lot. Michael looked at Scout, sleeping peacefully after their meaningful day, and felt a surge of protective anger, then profound gratitude. The cruel rejection that led to Scout's abandonment had brought him to Michael's door that pivotal night. "Too soft," Michael whispered, thinking of the lives Scout had already touched with that exact quality. Their loss, our gain. In that moment, Michael finally grasped the shocking truth of their story. Sometimes our greatest wounds lead us straight to our greatest purpose, and what looks like abandonment might be the universe steering us exactly where we need to be. 1 year to the day since a starving Labrador Retriever collapsed on his porch, Michael stood on that same spot, watching Scout demonstrate search patterns for a small group of handler trainees. The cabin had transformed alongside its occupants, now serving as Second Chance Canine Training Center, specializing in therapy and support dogs for crisis situations. "The bond between handler and dog is everything," Michael explained to the group. "It's built on trust, consistency, and mutual respect. These animals aren't just tools, they're partners." As if to prove it, Scout finished his demo and returned to Michael's side. Their sync so complete, it looked effortless. The Labrador's once dull coat now shone in the autumn sunlight, his confident stance showing no trace of the trauma that nearly took his life. After the session, Michael and Scout retreated to their favorite viewpoint, a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley ablaze with fall colors. It had become their tradition to end each day here, watching the mountains shift, from gold to purple as the sun dipped low. 1 year, Michael mused, his hand resting on Scout's head. Hard to believe. The changes in that year were profound. Michael's isolated existence had expanded to include regular work with regional emergency services, weekend training, programs, and a growing network of handlers and first responders. His expertise in mountain rescue and trauma recovery had found new expression through their therapy work. Most meaningful were the letters and photos covering one cabin wall, thank you notes from crisis survivors Scout had comforted. The Labrador had an uncanny knack for spotting those most in need. offering his steady presence with a dignity and gentleness that somehow acknowledged human pain without being overwhelmed by it. "You know what Dr. Wilson called us yesterday?" Michael said to Scout as they watched eagles soar on thermals above the valley. "She said we're wounded healers, that there's something about having been broken that helps us understand how to help others piece themselves back together." Scout's brown eyes met his, filled with the compassion that had changed Michael's life. In that gaze was their shared journey, from devastation to purpose, the daily choice to turn pain into service, the deep bond that had saved them both. Darkness settled over the mountains. They walked back to the cabin together, Michael with only a slight limp now, Scout matching his pace perfectly. The lights of their home glowed, warmly against the night, no longer a place of isolation, but a beacon of new beginnings. Inside, Michael paused before the framed photo that held a place of honor beside their certifications and awards. It showed Scout on his first day, painfully, thin, wounded, wary, next to a recent shot of him in his therapy dog vest, strong and proud. Between the images was a simple inscription: "Sometimes the most shattered souls become the strongest healers." That night, as Scout settled into his usual spot at the foot of Michael's bed, a winter storm began building outside, much like the blizzard that had first brought them together. But this time, the howling winds carried a different message. Sometimes what looks like the end is actually the start of something extraordinary. The abandoned Labrador Retriever, who'd stumbled into a stranger's house in the dead of night, had sparked something shocking. Not just a rescue, but a total transformation of two broken lives into something more whole, more purposeful, and more beautiful than either could have become alone. If this story touched your heart, remember there are real dogs like Scout waiting for their second chance right now. Every act of compassion creates ripples we may never fully see, just as one abandoned Labrador Retriever forever changed the life of a man who'd given up on healing.